What is up, Jabroni? JJ back here with the crew. Coop, Jason, talking a little Richmond NASCAR. Be nice to get a track, boys, with a lot of dominator points up for grabs. I will say this. Last week, I'm not sure if you guys knew or not. I know I was told this by Mikey because I think you guys might know this by now. I don't even look at scores until, as most should, by the way, in NASCAR, don't even look at scores until the end of the race. But after the third random or before the third random stop of the race last week, I was shipping the 25K. I was I was told that I was also in the top 10 of the big 100K. So yeah, it was frustrating to say the least, because I knew for a fact, based on the ownership guys that I had, that after that second one where people were placed, I'm like, oh wow, I'm probably very live based on my ownership numbers. But then was it Blaney or somebody got into it bad randomly? And yeah, it sucked. It sucked pretty big because Blaney was in 16th, which was plenty good for all the lineups I had. I locked him in. Just a really weird race with all the constant endings, which is what makes the sport fun, because you always feel like you're in it, right? Like before that even happened, I felt like I was dead. And then a few accidents happened. It's like, whoa, now I'm in it again. What's your guys' take, and how do you handle that? Coop, I'll start with you. As far as like that level of variance where you're like, in one breath, it's like, wow, in the late stages of a race, we're not talking like, the beginning of a race, late stages of a race, 6 laps left. Your lineups have to look good, whether you're looking at the scores or not, based on your ownership numbers. And then just randomness falls apart. And what was there, 4 or 5 restarts late? I know that's not a common theme, but how do you kind of handle the mental aspects of that? Because it's not fun. I mean, it's fun when you win, but it's not fun when you're winning and then you're not. How do you handle that?
The mental aspect is I don't look at my lineups. I look at them at the very beginning of the race to check out the ownership. And then after that, I leave them off until it's completely done. So, I'm not going to be put in a situation, like you didn't look, you were just told, but I know a lot of people out there look at their lineups and constantly, and it just constantly changes. And, it's not good for your mental health.
Yeah. Woof. And what about you, Jason? What's your kind of perspective there with how you approach that aspect of it?
Yeah, I love the torture, right? I look at the lineups. I like to see where I'm at. I like to see how I'm performing because, I don't play a ton of lineups, right? So I kind of know where my guys are at anyway. So I don't need to look to know if I'm doing well. But as far as from a mental aspect, it can be tough. Like yesterday, for example, in the truck race at Texas, man, I played 3 lineups and was just top 3 the entire race, the whole race, top three, and then cautions, at the end, and everything just spirals, and then I barely make a profit. That's just the way it is. The way I look at it is, as long as I'm in contention late in that race, and have a chance late, that's all you can ask for. With those cautions, sometimes they're going to go your way, sometimes it's going to break your way. You just got to be in position. You keep putting yourself in position, it's going to break your way eventually. So.
Fair enough. Because that's always it, right? Like how you best can handle it. And some people like the sweats. Like I don't blame people for doing it. It's fun. Obviously the ebbs and flows. And if you see yourself near the top, oh shit, I just need this to happen. I get that. So everybody's different in their own way. So much respect regardless. It's always nice to hear other people's perspectives and how they handle it. Cause it is a mental grind for sure in its own way to each of us individually. So no, good stuff all around. Now this track's completely different than some of the recent tracks. Definitely a polar opposite to last week. We got a ton of laps in play, a totally different track to begin with. And I know tire wear is going to be a bit of a concern at least. And dominator points are huge. Place differential, of course, is important, but it's not nearly as important as it usually is with all these laps up for grabs. Granted, place differential becomes more of a thing if one person just nukes the slate from a dominator standpoint. But if that doesn't happen, it does spread things out and it does take away from the potential for place differential. So before we go into Coop's playbook, which obviously we do all the time, Jason, you do a great free article right on the site. You can grab it right off runpuresports.com. Just breaking down things from top to bottom, track history, a cheat sheet of guys, notes on some of those guys as well. And then even a little snippet of your cash core with a little bit of a tournament as well. Walk us through briefly a little breakdown of the track, Jason, and what maybe you're looking for today. Because even maybe talking to a guy like Alex Bowman, who's starting from the pole but his odds aren't really that excellent considering where he's starting from. So his ownership's likely not going to be that great. What are you doing with a guy like him? Because it looks like the big guy's going to be Byron, maybe Harvick, but it doesn't look like these guys are getting as much love up front to other guys that are actually at the pole. So walk me through a bit of that in the track as well.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head as far as like how races typically play out at Richmond. You know, it's a high tire wear track. You know, not a lot of variance. Short flat track. We generally see long green flag runs. It's hard to move through the field when you're getting deep in a long green flag run. The field gets spread out. It gets hard to gain position. It means track position matters immensely here. In the last 7 Richmond races, we've seen 46% of the top 10 DK scores came from guys starting inside the top 10. That's 32 guys. You know. And to your point on like, you know, the pole sitters have just performed massively at Richmond. It doesn't matter if, you know, if they qualify, if the metric is sorted by the metric that we use today to start a position. Like the guy who starts out front generally is going to lead some laps and score some dominator points. The pole sitter hasn't scored less than 15 dominator points in those 7 races and have scored over 20 dominator points in 5 of those races, you know, so constantly, I think top 7 in DK scoring in 6 of the last 7 races. So yeah, that pole sitter is almost a lock. And when you get a guy like Bowman, who's priced in that 9,200 range, and you're talking he's going to come in low ownership, like he's jammed into my single entry today because I love that. I love that leverage you're going to get with a guy who, if no one's going to play him and he has that potential to score 20, 30, 40 dominator points, even if he comes out and maintains that lead after the competition caution. His pit team is good. You know, it's HMS equipment. You know, there's no reason he can't stay up front and hold on to that lead.
Fair enough. And obviously we'll talk on Byron and Coop. I'll pose this question to you. Is it just me or has it appeared like Billy B is doing everything in his power to lead laps at tracks? Like, I don't know if it's just consistently looking for stage points, but man, this dude is doing everything he can, especially on restarts, to get his car in front. We saw this a lot with like Chastain last year, where just the ability to pass has been great. Now, Byron had a little bit of issues in certain ways at the last track and maybe a few tracks now, but his ability to pass, I think, has been one of the best thus far. Is it crazy to think that he's able to grab the lead early in the race and then just not look back? Or do you think it's going to be one of those things where he plays it safer? But again, that hasn't been what we've seen from him. He's been very aggressive in getting to the front of races recently. What's your take on Byron today? Obviously being the favorite too.
No, yeah, it's a very fast car. You know, it's no different than like what he did last year. He was very fast in the first, 10 races last year. And then, the rumor is Hendrick just started using him as a test car. Since he had 2 wins and he was pretty much locked in, and he fell off tremendously. So, it wouldn't surprise me, if he gets out front very quickly. I think it's a big advantage for him and Bowman. Hendrick has shown to be fast on the short runs, and the first stage is going to be broken up basically 30 laps and 40 laps because of that competition caution. So it wouldn't surprise me to see them split it or see one of them, lead the majority of the first stage laps. But we're in a blind situation. You're going to see some cars come very quickly at the beginning of this race, and you're going to see some cars fall very quickly at the beginning of this race because there was no practice. So if they didn't hit the proper setup, they're going to fall back quickly. Look at Justin Allgaier yesterday. Started on the pole and basically fell back starting on lap number 2. That's going to happen to somebody who's starting in the top 5. Who it is, I don't know.
Yeah, I think that's what's going to make this track very fun because usually I'm the type of person who usually just takes one or 2 dominators max and then just build the lineups from there. But I'll tell you what, like, it's not crazy to think different guys can grab you, 20, 30 points themselves today, as long as it doesn't get crushed. But again, to me, if Byron is a guy that jumps to the front early, that's a problem for that type of build because it's been very clear. Byron, when he's getting a lead, he doesn't relinquish it unless it's something in his box, like his pit box. Unless something happens there, he's just not looking back. So we'll talk more on that, and we'll start to go through the playbook here. Just some things of note that I've kind of noticed for this slate. Based on the fact that people want to be top heavy, based on the fact that pricing is a little tighter this week than most. Am I seeing this right? Like a guy like Ryan Preece is going to be like nuke type ownership. Is that like 50%, 40% Ryan Preece? That's kind of interesting because I like Priest, but man, I don't know if I can like him at that ownership. And Josh Berry, what am I missing there? Like, am I missing? Oh, just so I'm quick, before we talk on the slate, Josh Berry is looking like 35% ownership today. What am I missing there? Because he's just an easy X for me every week since he's been taking over this car. Why would this week be any different?
You want to get that one? Basically, I think everybody's all aboard the Josh Berry train because they just saw him lap yesterday in the Xfinity Series, run very well here, right? He typically does very well at short flat tracks. He finished top 10 at Phoenix earlier this year in the Cup car, driving the 9 car that's typically good on short flats, and he's really good at high tire wear tracks. For me, where I kind of like pull back my love on Josh Berry a little bit is the fact that it's just difficult to move through the field here, and I'm not really focusing a ton on spending dollars on those position differential guys like that. If I like, and that's why like I would much rather play a guy like Priest who's cheap because then it still allows me to afford, the guys who I think can score dominator points up there instead of having to try to go for a guy who might score me 20 position differential points, right? If we look at the last 7 races here at Richmond, only 9 guys scored over 20 position differential points in those races. If you look at, in contrast to those guys who scored dominator points, we saw 26 guys score over 20 dominator points in those same races. So I'm much more apt to spend on those high ceiling guys and just let the field go for those position differential plays.
Now, let me ask you this quickly, because obviously it's a short track, so you play guys from the back. You worry about them going a lap down. No competition caution here. Is that correct?
There's one 30.
Oh, there is one. But what lap is it?
30.
30. Okay, so do you feel confident that even a guy starting from the back with no cautions before is like a guy like Priest, right? Like he doesn't need something crazy to happen. Like if he was to stay in 33rd, you don't think he'd be lapped before the competition caution, right?
Not in 30 laps, no.
So I do think that makes him more, and that might be part of the reason why his ownership's going to get jacked. Like I do think that makes it better, right? You worry about these tracks where it's shorter. No, you need the caution, you don't get it, and he gets lapped. He's down a lap, and then next thing you know, it's woof from there. It looks like he's gonna see a lot of ownership today.
That competition caution is a big advantage for the driver starting in the back because it is going to be harder for them to get lapped early in the race, at least. And then second, it's also a big advantage for the drivers starting in the top 5, in my opinion, because, like I said, I wouldn't be surprised if Bowman or Byron, led the majority of the laps in the first stage. Whereas if there was no competition caution, it would bring in, Harvick, Truex, Hamlin, possibly Logano or Blaney, those type of drivers.
And one last point, I do like to talk on this. I know, we kind of go all over the place on tangents, and that's my fault. Eat my ass if you have an issue with it. Bubba Wallace. It almost seems like he's forgotten how to drive a car the last few races. I think he was even quoted saying, rookie mistake, can't happen. They might have to look into changing. He was referring to himself, right? Like almost sarcastically when he made that comment. Yeah. His price, I mean, where he's starting from, win equity. Like if it wasn't Bubba Wallace in that car, you would probably be higher on him. I know he's going to be, I guess, sub 30% owned, but if he didn't have these struggles these last 2 races, you would figure he would be closer to 50% owned. What are you guys doing with Bubba Wallace today?
I'll have a little bit of Bubba. He has a lot of upside. I don't necessarily love the guy because tire wear tracks have been a struggle for him. But, he's in a Toyota, which is positive for this race. And then, the guy puts a lot of pressure on him. I mean, he's in a unique situation. He's one of the few drivers out there that is just bringing in sponsorship left and right, where other drivers are struggling for that. And, that alone right there, puts more pressure on him because he feels he needs to perform, for those sponsors. So, but, I think some things would have to happen in order for Bubba to really play out well in this race. I know a lot of people will, look and say, hey, look at what he did at Loudon. He was really fast and things of that nature. I wouldn't have a problem. I would really love him if he was starting 28th in Loudon. But my concern here is the tire wear, which he, typically hasn't been very strong at.
Fair enough. Okay,
But
so
back to Josh Berry real quick. Like you said, 35%. Like there's no way Josh Berry's going to be 35%
I don't think so either.
I mean,
Absolutely no way.
I guess based on this,
If Josh Berry's 35% owned, that means either Brad Keselowski or Eric Almirola are much less owned than what they should be.
I saw Almirola projected at lower than I would have thought, but I don't know. Maybe people are just tired of Almirola.
So I can promise you this, Coop. Josh Berry's going to see ownership for sure today. He's 40 to 1.
Definitely.
40 to 1 to win, and he's starting from 30th, and he's decently like he's going to see ownership. I mean, granted, I get it. Kez will see ownership, but Kez is only a few odd points better to win the race at 30 to 1, and he's starting like 6 places in front of him. And I think he's more expensive. So I'm not saying Kez is not a bad. Kez is a good play too, but I'm just saying that it doesn't. I see 30% for Berry, 35%. It wouldn't surprise me if in higher stakes that's where he landed, 30%. Just because, again, you build lineups based on projections, and projections wise, like he does project well here. Now, whether we have our own biases about him or not or whatever, it kind of just reality. Much the same where a guy like Bubba Wallace. I think Bubba Wallace is going to see 20-25% ownership today. You look at the price, you look at his win equity, where he's starting from. It's just reality.
Right, but like if let's say both of them have the same amount of ownership, I'm playing Josh Berry over Bubba Wallace.
That's fair.
And a head-to-head.
And I would be, I'm honest, it's very fair. But you look at it here, the two of them, Bubba Wallace is less win equity, starting from a position closer. But it goes back to what I'm saying. It's not going to surprise me if Berry is 35% owned because of these factors. Again, you just kind of look at this is how this is how these, especially in the bigger pools where optimizers get used. Like this is how these guys project. It's just kind of. So yeah, we'll talk more on Berry as we go through your core, Coop. But let's start. Let's get that party started. The dominators, the biggest part of today's race. It's not often that dominators are the biggest part of your lineup construction, but today it likely will be. So who are we going with? Who are some guys you might take a stand on? And I guess above all else, who are your favorites here? Maybe talk manufacturers. I know you talked on Toyota being a good manufacturer to have today, but what's the thought process here for who we're going with for dominators?
I think you got to look at like how do you think the race is going to play out, and I think when we have that competition caution, it sets up for this race to have more leaders at less laps led than what it does to have one or two drivers really dominate this race, because the pit up top gives the competition caution up front gives them an opportunity to pit, which obviously means that the track position can change during the pits and things of that nature. But I think, like I said before, it really is a big favor for Byron and Busch and Chastain, Reddick, and Bowman because the drivers Harvick, Hamlin, and Truex, they excel when the tires get worn. They're not necessarily going to be fast on short runs. So while they can make their way up and get in better spots for stage 2, I think, that it makes it more difficult in this first stage not to have like Byron, Bowman, Busch, Reddick, or Chastain, not multiple of them, but at least one of them on your team to start with, because they have a great shot at leading, anywhere from 40 to 50, 60 laps in this stage. So, I give, the advantage now to Bowman and Byron because, like I said, the short run, I think they're going to be better than Kyle Busch, better than Chastain, and I think Reddick might be able to compete with them on the short run. So if I had to do that, I like Reddick because I think he's going to see a lot less ownership than all of them drivers. And next to William Byron, he's the fastest car on the track week in and week out. People aren't going to play him because of his Richmond history. He hasn't been great here, but he's in a Toyota, which has had phenomenal results here. And, he did the same thing at Phoenix, where he wasn't very good at Phoenix, but he went out and he drove very well. What I like to get today is a long run so that hopefully we can finally answer the question of, is Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick good at saving and managing tires, or are they good at running the wall? Because you're not going to run the wall here. It'll really show if they're good at managing tires.
I mean, there's a lot there to sift through. And I will say this. So one question on Cindric. Thoughts on Cindric seems too cheap. I worry about upside. So I know he's 6,800. And he's starting from 6. It also, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, like Cindric's like good finishes this year have really just felt like attrition. Like he just happened to not get in an accident on races where a lot of guys in front of him didn't finish or got their car messed up. And then there he is just magically. It kind of happened at the last race as well. Like he wasn't in contention anywhere near the race. And at the end, magically, what did he end up in like 5th? Wasn't even in the top 15 like the entire race. And then there just happened to be chaos ensuing consistently. And he just kind of slowly but surely worked his way up. I just don't think he's been that fast at all. And I think from his position, you're going to need him to lead some laps. Look, if he finishes T5 at that price, you're probably okay. But man, that seems like a tough ask here. So yeah, no, for me, a guy like him is usually a guy I always fade, at least on a slate like this. But again, crazier things have happened. I don't think he's going to see much ownership either, so it does make you different. So just some perspective there on your question, Star-Lord. All right. So any Jason, Dominators. I know obviously Coop gave his thoughts. Any crazy stands you're taking?
I don't really have too much to add. Like he touched on all the guys that I like. I mean, I'm kind of probably leaning a little bit more into the JGR guys today than maybe Coop is. I know you're probably having several shares of them, Coop, but I really like JGR here. I mean, they've won obviously 6 of the last 9 races here at Richmond. If you look at those guys who scored Dominator points, of those 26 performances of 20 plus Dominator points, JGR makes up 12 of them. Christopher Bell, Denny Hamlin, Martin Truex, these guys have just been lights out on short flat tracks. I expect them to show up with a ton of speed. Like nobody has been better than the Hamlin Truex combo here. So them starting 11th and 12th, I'm not concerned about them at all getting to the front. I mean, if you look at their percentage of fast laps at Richmond, they are both running at almost 10% click. That's almost 1 out of every 10 laps they've run at Richmond in the last 7 races here has been a fast lap. So they're going to have speed. They're going to be to the front. Like I said, I love JGR, and probably the guy who I'm getting different is, who I'm seeing pick up speed today, who I thought was going to be a little bit more lower owned, was Ross Chastain. I like Chastain today, starting 4th. I talked about how important track position is here. He was able to take a 2nd place start at the last time we were here at Richmond and led like 80 laps, put up some fast laps. He scored 28 Dominator points in that race. For 8,700, like a guy that can get to the front and score Dominator points and have that kind of upside, like give me that all day over a guy like Blaney or Brad Keselowski, who you're just hoping gets you those position differential points.
So here's an interesting take. Oh, go ahead, Coop.
I was going to say, do you think Hamlin or Truex and even Harvick have an opportunity to win stage 1?
Not stage 1, no.
Right. That's why I think you've got to have like.
Yeah, I think I do have
a Bowman or a Byron.
To be fair, I think I have a Bowman, Byron, or Chastain in probably every lineup I'm playing. Right. So like I do have I do have that, but like I think you can. But from there, it's probably your Truexes, your Hamlins. I think everybody's got a ton of Bell, right? Which if we're talking about guys you could fade, like those Bell and Harvick guys, guys who are not starting with that track position, who are going to get a ton of ownership, like those are the guys who are interested to me to maybe get off of in GPP, because there's no guarantee they make it to the front. We know they have to score Dominator points to pay off this price tag. Like they're not going to pay it off just by, like Harvick is not going to pay off that price tag by doing what he did in this race last year, finishing 2nd, scoring 4 Dominator points. Not going to happen, right? He's got to get out front, score a chunk of points to pay off.
Right, like Harvick. He's getting a lot of ownership, but it's going to be tough for him to pay off his price. I do agree, because he's not going to be one that's going to lead 150 to 200 laps in this race, because more than likely, he's not going to have a fast short run car. If he does have a fast short run car, then he very well may smoke the damn shit out of the field. Because we know he's going to have a very good long run car. So that's going to hurt him get those Dominator points. And, like you said, if he only gets 40, 50 laps led, is that going to be enough? It all depends upon, what the prices are and who, gets those Dominator points minus him.
Right.
So I don't think he's as safe as what people might be, thinking of.
So just real quick, guys, let's make sure we like the video. Obviously, a lot of good content here all around. And as always, look, we've got 250 watching. We get to 150 likes. I'll give you, actually, you know what? We get to 150 likes. We'll all give you our favorite DFS play, pound for pound of the slate. So we'll each go around, favorite DFS play, pound for pound. The guy we're going to be the most overweight on. I won't say the guy we're most, better way. I won't say the guy that we're going to be the highest percentage on. The guy we will be the most overweight on versus, ownership field. And it'll be better for you guys anyway. All right. So one quick question or one quick point I wanted to bring up. Now I kind of lost my train of thought. Tough scene, boys. Tough scene.
In there.
It does look like as much as we talk about, odds and whatnot. So Ross Chastain, it's looking like 15% ownership, which is tough because he's been so bad. Like last week, he just squirmed his way to the front because of all the nonsense in front of him.
You missed the first half of the race where he was running up towards the front.
Well, like what I mean is like results wise, which is what matters. Like the guy just never gets there. Like recently this year is just not getting there. And I get it. To me, if you remember, like last year, to me, he was a lot like Blaney. Like Blaney was in the front of almost every race for a good portion of last year. And then magically you look at the end, the last 30 laps, he's nowhere in the top 10, nowhere in the top 15. Something happened, whether it was his pit, whether he hit somebody, it was just almost consistent. With Ross Chastain, it's felt pretty similar. Now maybe it's kind of the bad luck, if you will. It seemed like he had a lot of good luck last year. He was playing with a lot of fire while he was racing in terms of accidents and dodging accidents. This year, it hasn't been much of the same. Convince me, now granted, just based on price alone, I get it. He's a great play. Convince me why he's been a better driver than his results. And by the way, last week I throw out because he was not in the top 15 before all those accidents started happening late in the race. Top 10?
I think he was running up towards the front towards that first half of the race before
I'm talking before chaos ensued.
Yeah. And then he finished top 5, right? I think.
I know he squirmed his way to the front after all the accidents. I know that.
He didn't squirm his way to the front. He raced his way back to
the here's what I knew. With how the race played out, he would have had to finish in second to even make the optimal because he had no laps led. He had 2 guys in front of him that were leading laps. So walk me through. The price is a good spot. Don't get me wrong. The ownership is another good spot. But convince me why he's been a better car than maybe the overall results have looked.
Yeah, I don't know. I have a good answer for that, to be honest, because I mean, HMS has been like the leader of the pack, right? I mean, they've been the guys who's out front, so it's really hard to give you any reason for as far as this year why he would be good. But I mean, he had, like you said, he's got the track position, which is key here, right? I mean, just starting up towards the front is paramount to success here. So he's got that. Trackhouse has been fast. I think even Daniel Suarez, if you look at him, he's ran like 30 fast laps here recently, probably more than Reddick, more than some of the other guys on 2311, racing and. So, I mean, Trackhouse always has speed, right? Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm not justified. Maybe it's my Chastain love,
Yeah, so I'm trying to figure out, is it a subjective bias? Because you look at his results. I mean, the 3 races before last week wasn't even close, and then last week he shouldn't even have been close. I mean, he was good in the beginning, but again, as the race went on, it seemed like he got pushed further and further backwards.
I mean, Phoenix he was decent at, right? I mean, I think he had average position of 9th, which is probably like 5th or 6th best. So, he hasn't had that top 5 speed, but he's been running right there. I like I said, I mean, you got the Trackhouse speed. He's got a great pit crew, right? He's got the 3rd ranked pit crew for the year on 4-tire pit stops right now. So he's going to have a great, pit selection starting 4th. We're going to have a ton of 4-tire pit stops today. So if he's running towards the front every time they come in, he's got a shot at getting out front. Especially like you said, we got the caution flag at lap 30. You come in for a quick 4-tire stop, everybody's going to come out. His pit crew gets him out ahead of Byron. He's got that track position now. Then he's leading 80 laps. And the thing is his finishing position doesn't matter. If he falls to 10th or 12th here, if he racks up 40 to 50 dominator points midway through the race, that's not going to matter. And that's the thing about dominator points here is you can rack up so much that falling 10 positions ain't going to hurt you like last week at a road course would have when you're only racking up 5 to 10 dominator points.
Yeah, I can't argue that. And obviously, Chastain has a decent shot to win. Real quick, Coop, before we go to your next section on the playbook, what are you doing with Chastain today? His price is the lowest he's been all season. He's got the good track position, as Jason mentioned. He is going to have to push past Byron, though. What's your thoughts on him? Only 14% ownership at the cheapest price he's been all year.
Trackhouse is, in general, they're behind where they were last year when it comes to the speed aspect. They're not far behind, but they're not to where they were last year. And if you look at the data, their worst track style or track format, whatever you want to call it, was flats last year. They did not do the best on flats. So, the only thing I would play Chastain for, which I'm not, is the price.
Okay, I cannot argue. All right, so we will move over to our next section, place differential. Coop, what are we doing here? Chris Bell, a guy that Jason spoke highly on. He's a great place differential guy, a great win equity guy for his spot too. You're not exactly getting him for a big discount though. Was he 10-3? So, Coop, walk us through who you like for place differential and maybe some guys you're going to fade.
Well, obviously, Chris Bell is, the number one out there for reasons why is because he's great at these short, flat tracks. He absolutely loves Richmond. In the Xfinity Series, he absolutely dominated here. He's had very good success here in the Cup Series. And, if I'm looking at Harvick and I'm looking at Bell, I will lock in Bell before Harvick today. Because he gives you more place differential upside. And I think the chances for either one of them to lead and or dominate and or win is equal, if not better, for Bell, in my opinion. So, I really like Chris Bell a lot. After that, Keselowski's going to be, popular. It's just a matter of which RFK team shows up, the one that has speed, the one that doesn't have speed, because it seems like every other week, one time they do, the next week they don't. The thing that scares me with Brad here is this is a big strategy race, and Brad loves to play strategy. And if you play the strategy game, it's going to end one of two ways. It's going to end up very well for you, or it's going to end up very bad for you. Very rarely does it end up in the middle, because if you play that strategy, like I said, it's going to have one of those two outcomes. So there's a high risk, with him in that, but I'll definitely have some with him. After that, we touched on Bubba Wallace a little bit. Austin Dillon, I think, is another driver who's going to get a lot of ownership. Personally, I would rather play Bubba Wallace.
He looked good last week. It felt like he got the real short end of the stick late with that accident, but he looked really good. Just magically wound up in the front of the race before all the chaos ensued.
But I would rather play Bubba over Austin Dillon because of the ownership piece. Austin's had just as many good races here as he's had bad races. And I know Jason's not high on Kyle Busch. And if you're not high on Kyle Busch, you shouldn't be high on Austin Dillon. They did not look good at Phoenix in this package. So it wouldn't surprise me, if he runs back in the 23rd, 24th, 25th place position all day. It's a risky play, but, I think, his chances of finishing in the top 20 are just as good as Bubba Wallace's. Look, I know you're crazy, man, but look at Austin Dillon. He's had a lot of bad races here. And if you
bet you Bubba's had more bad races here. How many top 10s Bubba have here?
Right, but Bubba's in a Toyota, which is much better for me than a Chevy.
Have you seen what 2311 has done at Richmond in the last since the organization has been around? Like 9 total fastest laps and 0 top 10s for the organization. 2311 in a Toyota.
I don't care about lead. I just care about finishing position between the two.
Okay.
But Austin Dillon has had just as many bad races here as he has had good races. And if you're probably going to play Austin Dillon at 30%, Bubba Wallace is going to be like half that ownership. So, I look at it from that perspective.
Can Bubba Wallace remember how to drive properly? Can that happen? Like, it just feels like
like I said, he's tough on himself, man. So he's just tough.
And I like that. I just feel like the dude just.
I think from a roster construction, like if you think that 1 or 2 drivers is going to dominate this race, like I would load up more on these guys. But if you think there's going to be more spread out between the dominators, like I would take the dominators over these place differential guys. And I would probably only end up with like one of them.
Can't argue that. Jason, anything you want to add there on the Dillon stuff?
Yeah, I really like Austin Dillon. Like, I know he's going to be high owned. I know I'm a chalk donkey, but average finish of 11th over the last 7 races here. I mean, he's 4 top 10s, 6 top 20s. I mean, yeah, he's really good at Richmond. He's really good at saving his stuff, saving his tires. Like, that's what he excels at. And like, he's shown to be able to have that ability in this RCR equipment, even while his Tyler Reddick, the way better driver, supposedly has had 0 success here, right, in the same equipment. So I like Austin Dillon. If I'm looking to get different in this range, if you are looking to get different, a guy who stands out to me who no one's going to play is Ty Gibbs. We talked about how good JGR is here. Ty Gibbs is great on the short flats. He's starting with track position, starting in the top 14. There's very likely he can finish in the top 10 here. I mean, JGR is great. Gibbs is going to show up. He's won here at Richmond in the Xfinity Series. No one, like I said, is going to play him. And if some of these other guys get trapped a lap down and he holds that lead lap and can provide upside, that when these other guys will be trapped.
If you're that high on Austin Dillon, how can you not be high on Kyle Busch? Because Kyle Busch is better on longer runs than him.
There's a significant price difference between
right. There's a significant price differential, but like we're talking like same. For every reason that you said Austin Dillon's going to do good, Kyle Busch would do just as well for those same reasons.
No, to play Kyle Busch, I would need him to score dominator points, right? Like, I don't think he can. I don't think he's going to score dominator points. I don't think he's going to outrun JGR guys. I don't think he's going to outrun the HMS guys. Like, I think RCR is okay. They're decent. They're good enough for Austin Dillon to go from 27th to like 12th. But I don't think they're good enough for Kyle Busch to outrun the rest of these guys and all these strong cars around him. So that's kind of my philosophy.
But if you think he's good enough to go from 27th to 12th, that in my mind would tell me that you have to think Kyle Busch is very good enough to lead this race.
Yeah, I guess not. I guess I think Kyle Busch can fall back and run 6th the entire race, right? And just never score any dominator points.
And you don't see a path for Austin Dillon just to run 20.
Yeah, I do see that. Yeah, that's obviously possible. I haven't GM'd Austin Dillon in every single lineup I'm playing, but I'm not just. I do like Austin Dillon.
Always love a good debate. All right, so let's move on to the next section. Drivers looking for a good finish from. This could be just win equity alone, Coop, obviously, or could be just guys you think are good, happy mediums, guys that provide the ability for place differential, and guys that could, of course, win the race. So good mix of both. Walk us through. I know Christopher Bell would fit that angle, but he fit the angle better in terms of value. Who do we like in this list? Drivers we need a good finish from.
This is a great section, and it's going to be very popular. And it's interesting to see how it's going to play out because you have Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex, who have great history here, but their prices are a lot. And then you have Logano and Blaney, who are on the cheaper side, have more upside from a place differential perspective. Blaney hasn't been great here, but he's getting better every time he comes here. Logano has had very good runs here, but he's also had some mixed runs. If you go back and look at how they did at Phoenix, not great from a speed perspective. If you look at the two of them in general, they tend to struggle when they're not in the clean air. They're starting mid-pack, so they could struggle for that aspect. If we get really long runs, it's not great for them either. So it's going to be interesting for me to see if people trend with those two versus Martin Truex and Denny Hamlin. I prefer Truex and Hamlin because I think their ownership is going to be lower than the two of them. So I just think in the long run, 8 or 9 times out of 10, the two of them are going to beat Ryan Blaney and Joey Logano here.
Cool. Jason, what about you?
The one driver in here I really like is Chase Briscoe, though. He hasn't been very good this year. He had a lot of high expectations at the beginning of the year. He's disappointed. I can't get out of my mind how well he ran at the end of Phoenix on long runs. If we have short runs, it's not going to be good for him. But if we have long runs, I think it can be very, very good for him. Nobody's going to play the guy again. Because of the drivers that are priced around him have much better upside than what he does. So he could be a difference maker for you in a GPP if he ends up, in that top 10 and some others around him falter.
And just to answer this, why is Blaney getting so much ownership? Like literally the dude sees ownership every week, like every week.
It's priced too.
His price is nice this week. Now, the question I have for, I'll kick this to you, Jason. Track like this, going to be a lot of pit stops. I always worry about that pit crew. Does that add extra concern for you, for Blaney as a whole? It just feels like you get a really good version of Blaney for like 25% of the race, and you just kind of hope, in my opinion, if you're playing Blaney, you just kind of hope that he's dodged accidents for the first 75% and he didn't use up that good Blaney for the 25%.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end of the race, he can kind of find his way to get the best version of himself. It just feels like a perfect storm that you need when you play him. And it's not like you get him at low ownership. So what do we do with Blaney today? And maybe walk us through other guys that you think have good win equity today.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of Blaney today. Like I see him getting a lot of traction, and it's just something that I'm not focused on, because again, I'm looking for dominator points. You know, I am not going to pay for a guy to score me 10 position differential points today, and that's what I see out of Blaney. I just don't see the upside. I don't see him getting the field. If I'm going to take a chance on somebody, it's going to be his teammate Logano. I mean, if you look at Logano, he's got 20 plus dominator points at least one time in the last 4 years here. So 4 times in the last 4 years, he's done that. He's accomplished that. He's shown the ability to get out. Blaney hasn't. The only really solid run Blaney's had here, he started on the pole. So yeah, he scored dominator points because he started on the pole. Every other race, like he's struggled to make the top 10. Like he's going to start 17th. I just don't see him getting to the front. He's just not going to pay off that salary. He's going to get outscored by several guys around him. They're going to score those fast laps.
And that's what makes sense, right? So if you make the argument, well, how does Blaney find his way into the optimal? Likely accidents that are in front of him that he dodges. But again, he doesn't dodge accidents either. So he was in a good spot. He was in a good spot last week. And I felt like it was, you had the recipe at restarts, play the edge, play the outsides. He purposely jammed himself in the middle of 30 cars. And of course, got bumped, spun around. Like I don't think he races very smart, like throughout the entire race. And it usually comes back to bite him. And again, you look at it consistently, even a guy like Bubba Wallace, I just don't think they race smart races from end to end, and it bites them. And then, you can take off anomalies here and there and say, oh, nothing he could do there, nothing he could do there, nothing he could do there. There is just a pattern with these two drivers. So yeah, take that for what you will. I do think Bubba Wallace, I would definitely play Wallace over Blaney today, but I just think it feels like Russian roulette playing these guys, hoping for bad to happen that doesn't involve them, because it seems like when bad happens, it involves them. So Coop, what do you do? Just real quick, what are you doing with Blaney today?
I think what's interesting, is I know the price is quite a bit different, but if you take Kevin Harvick and like what Jason said earlier, if he finishes second here, like he did, one of the races last year and doesn't have very many dominator points, like Blaney and Harvick could be a very good pivot off of him. If they finish 7th or 8th at their price, more than likely they're going to end up scoring more points per dollar than what a Harvick would finishing second if he doesn't get those dominator points. So I think there's that aspect. And then the other piece too is like, you have Brian Blaney and Ross Chastain. They're right next to each other basically in price. But like you have the place differential upside from Blaney and you have the dominator upside, from Chastain. So it's going to be interesting to see who clicks on which one for me. I feel more confident in Blaney than what I do in Logano. And, Blaney is a driver that screwed everybody week in, week out. And I think a lot of people are just going to talk themselves off of him, which maybe that's why Chastain's getting a little bit more, steam. And maybe Blaney doesn't come in as high owned as what maybe people think. And, maybe runs it back. And, I don't think he could win this race. But I think if he wins this race, it's kind of like what a Denny Hamlin did last year. It's on a strategy piece, or it's because he's at the end, he's near the front, and he has a good short run car, and he can outrun those cars that way. But, I'll have a little bit of Blaney, definitely.
All right, let's move over to value plays. Who do we like here? Obviously, there are some obvious pieces. Who do we like here? Who do we not like here? Because ultimately, if you're going to play a few different dominators, pricing is a little tight today. So expect these guys to see more ownership than they normally would. So what are we doing here, Coop?
This is very tough this week from a value perspective because we didn't get qualifying. So, it's based upon the metric as far as how the race is lined up. And, due to all those crashes at the end of last week's race, it allowed some of the value drivers to move up in position. So we have a lot of the value drivers who are starting a lot farther forward than what we would like to see. And then if you look at it from an upside perspective, it only leaves us like a handful of drivers to choose from in this value section. So I do expect them all to be, very popular. And, I kept looking at it and like, how do you get different? And like, it's hard, like, to get different because I don't want to get different with like Ty Dillon or, Cody Ware or those type of drivers. But yet I don't feel comfortable playing like a Michael McDowell starting 15th or a Todd Gilliland starting 13th. Chandler Smith, Ryan Preece, Harrison Burton, all those drivers are going to be popular because they have that place differential upside. And the competition caution is going to help them stay on the lead lap longer, than, what they would if it wasn't there. So, I think Chandler Smith's the one, he's got a couple of easy cars to pass. I thought it was very interesting how they priced him this week, not being a Cup regular. And he's priced, much higher than what, some of these Cup regulars are. So, I think you're just going to have to eat the chalk down here and try to get different in other ways.
Let me ask you this, and I'll kick this over to you, Jason. Guy like Chandler Smith seems like, as long as he can pass cars early so he doesn't get an early lap, seems like the best play on the side. I think seems like a better play than Preece, just based on Preece's ownership versus his ownership.
Yeah.
And again, I want to be clear. Preece is a better play, but when you talk on ownership and leverage, it does matter, and he's a little cheaper. Where do we need Smith to land today so he can end up in an optimal, even if you get 2 or 3 guys with heavy dominator points? Like, can he land in 20th?
Oh, that's asking a lot for I think out of Chandler Smith in this car from where he started. I mean, we've talked about track position matters, man. Like, there's just not guys that gain that much track position starting from the back. I mean, I'm not going to trust a guy in one of his first starts in a part-time car. But like I said, I get it. There's definitely the ownership play there, and if you have some attrition, and if he does hang on to the lead lap, he can absolutely. But I still think his upside's probably top 25 or so. And it's just rough, like you said, and it's tough to get different. So if you're really looking for a way to get different, that's probably your main option in this range, aside from like the full-fledged punt to a guy like Ty Dillon. Because I mean, if you're just playing the safe floor and attrition game, then Ty Dillon saves you a hell of a lot more salary. And like, I don't know how much more upside you're going to give Smith. I know Dillon sucks and is terrible, but I mean, they're both probably going to run.
So let's walk through this. Track like this for all the dominator points, I think it's pretty safe to say you're looking at a score of 350-esque, right? That wins this tournament today, maybe more, right? So you're going to get a little more than 5x out of your drivers, right? So when you click a guy like Chandler Smith's name, you knowing you need almost 6x out of your drivers today, can you get 36 out of Chandler Smith today? And you look at where he'd need to be to get you 36. He would basically need to finish in like 20th place. So to your point, that's why I mentioned 20th. To your point, if you don't think he can get there, or you need a hell of a lot of luck to get there, the dude's going to be 25% on. So do you just X him out, or do you play him at all? Coop, what are you doing with that?
I think the stars are aligned for the kid. First off, he absolutely loves Phoenix, and he absolutely loves Richmond. Those 2 tracks are his most favorite by far. And if you look at his results on those tracks, whether it was Truck or Xfinity, they've been stellar. All right. And you can't tell me in the back of his head, all right, he's thinking, this is a huge race for him. Because if he can go out there and beat Justin Haley again, like, he's going to put himself in a great position to be in that car next year in the Cup Series. So I think there's more on the line for him and he's riding all kinds of momentum. He ran this track yesterday, so that's a plus. The only thing that's hurting him is his, lack of experience in this car. But he has so much momentum going. It wouldn't surprise me if he finishes in that top 20.
Interesting. Definitely different perspective.
The kid is very good, very, very good.
I think it's tough. Right?
If Zane Smith's the one that I know Jason loves and everything, but like he's the third best Smith in racing. Mm-hmm. Sammy and Chandler are so much better than Zane Smith.
Because let me ask you this then, Coop. When you're building your lineups, you're very likely going to have a lot of your lineups that have at least one guy that's like 6,700 or less, right?
If not two.
So yeah. So for you, is that like Priest and another guy? Is that not Priest? Because obviously,
like I said, I think you've got to kind of get different, in other spots, because the upside is just there for these guys. If we didn't have that competition caution, there would be a better chance that they get lapped. But we don't have it, so it's going to take some time for that to happen. And if it even does happen, they can move up. But I don't think Priest is a lock. Anything can happen to Chandler Smith too. But I think from a construction standpoint, like if you're playing one of them, you're going to land on Austin Dillon a lot in your lineups. If you play two of them, that gives you more of an opportunity to go up to the Berries and the Amarolas and the Keselowskis. So, it's kind of a give and take of which way you want to go from a lineup construction standpoint. But I do think that's one reason why Austin Dillon's going to get a huge amount of ownership, because people are only going to want to play one of these guys. And when they do that, it's tough to get up to Amarola.
I think overall, as I look here at projections and whatnot, Priest is just going to see silly ownership. His price, where he's coming from. But I agree with you guys. Like, you look at who's in front of him. It's like, realistically, how many guys is he going to pass? Like, it's like, you just look here. Like, if you like Dillon, so he's not passing him. Bubba Wallace is likely going to not finish in 28. He's likely going to finish ahead of that. Barry's popular. He should finish above 30th. Almirola is going to be popular. Obviously, he can pass guys like Burton. Allmendinger, likely he's not going to lose his spots. Gregson is not a pushover. Then you got Eric Jones, Bell, Suarez, Briscoe, Logano. Like, it just feels like even Priest to get T20 seems like a stretch. Am I being crazy?
Yeah, but like the other piece too is like Eric Jones and Noah Gragson would be the pivots off of these guys. But like, they're not very good here traditionally. And for them to get into a top 20 is going to be, some work. And I think they just have as much of a chance to finish 25th, 26th, 27th, and lose them points too. So that's why I can't go there. And like, I would feel comfortable taking some shots on like a McCall or a LaJoy or Gillen if we didn't have the competition caution and we could see some of these drivers get locked a lap down. But with that competition caution, I think it just, leads more opportunity for them to fall back quicker.
Good enough. Jason, on your end, what's your thoughts? I know we briefly spoke on it, but as far as value goes, I know you like Dillon. Is that just somebody, and you got to pick your spots, right? Because there's
mm-hmm.
as Coop said, there's really like 5 to 6 value guys that are really going to be the heavy chalk, and then there's going to be differentiation around the rest of it. How are you progressing there? Is it just Dillon, maybe some Priest, maybe some Smith, or just Dillon and randoms? What are you doing there?
Yeah, I really like Priest today. I think the thing that sets Priest apart from some of the other guys we spoke about is like he's just really good at short flat tracks. That's probably why he's going to carry the ownership. We saw at Phoenix this year, earlier series started 25th, finished 12th. There's a lot of guys he can pass today, and he can definitely make it inside that top 20. But if you're looking to get different and looking to go even lower, I think you can get a guy like Justin Haley. He's been pretty consistent. He can probably finish inside the top 20. He's cheap, right? 5,500. And I think like the thing to keep in mind is like with these guys, you're basically using them, right, to save the salary so that you can jam in a bunch of these dominator guys up top. You're like, if you're doing this to jam in other position differential plays, you're just handcuffing yourself and limiting your upside. Like, you're doing this so you can jam in those guys who you can score you 50 to 60 points and carry your lineup and carry these guys so that you don't need Justin Haley to cross in that top 20. You just need the salary saver, need him to not wreck, So I think Haley falls in that mold and Burton kind of falls in that mold. But if you're looking for upside, like, it's hard to argue against Priest and now listening to Coop, Chandler Smith in that range. So
And I think you bring up another good point because maybe that's why Keselowski and Barry don't see as much ownership as what people think they might. Because to your point, do you want to shove them into your lineup, or do you want to try to get another a potential dominator in your lineup and go up above them?
Yeah, that's what I did. Only because my thought process is like, it's very possible to get 3 guys to score over 20 dominator points in this race. Like that typically happens. But what also happens is the more opportunity you allow yourself with those spots in your lineup, if you do nail that guy who scores 100 dominator points, like he's going to carry your lineup, right? So you're going to carry all those lineups that have them. So like the more of those guys you can get in your lineup, the better off you're going to be to score big.
All right, Coop, let's talk on your fades for the race. Any big folks that you don't like? And I see some interesting names in this list.
Chastain would be my big one, up front. But, I can't play Buescher. I don't want to take a shot on him. I don't want to take Cindric. We haven't spoke about Kyle Larson. But traditionally, this hasn't been one of his best tracks. He has been very fast, all year. But, he's had some issues, hurt his upside in a couple of those races. I think he's going to come in at very low ownership. And if you want to take a shot or two at him, you very well could pan out. But I think there's just a lot of scenarios that would have to happen for him to pan out. I could see Kyle Larson at less than 7% ownership this week.
Yeah, I mean, I can't argue that. It's looking like sub 10. So yeah, I mean, it looks about right. And when you think about it, just talking value, right? If you approach this sport with value instead of approaching this sport race to race, I mean, how many races this year are they going to be basically neck and neck with where they're starting? And Harvick's priced higher, or slightly lower. But yeah, Harvick's priced higher, and we'll see more ownership. How often is that going to happen this year? So if you're just talking coming into the race value, the upside you get out of drivers, Harvick, just based on price alone, feels like a fade. But obviously the track makes sense. But man, you are getting a ceiling price out of Harvick at decent ownership. Man, it just, if you approach this sport from a long-term game, he just does not feel like a good play today. But Jason, walk me through Larson, walk me through Harvick, and maybe another guy or two you're fading.
Yeah, Larson for me is a guy who I didn't even really consider when he come into Richmond. Richmond's just not a track he's good at, right? Richmond is a ride the bottom track. This is not a track that you see those guys who run the high line do well. That's why I believe Reddick struggles here. That's why we haven't seen Briscoe really have a great performance here. And I think everybody likes to associate Phoenix and Richmond, and it used to maybe be at one point, but I think ever since they added that the compound and the PJ1 stuff to the outside at Phoenix, it's really changed that track and allowed those guys to run the outside. So it's a little difference there. So Larson, he's not scored over more than 20 dominator points in any race here at Richmond. So you need a guy who's going to score points, get to the front. I'm not on him. Probably the big guy who I'm fading that I think is probably tracking some ownership this week is going to be Kyle Busch. Kyle Busch for me, in an RCR car. Yeah, I know, right? But RCR hasn't showed the speed to really, run up front, even with Reddick, right? And this car has struggled a ton last year. And the thing about Kyle Busch, he's had a lot of success at Richmond, but he hasn't had success recently, right? In the last 3 years, he's got outran by his teammates at Joe Gibbs Racing. He's got 0 performances in the last 3 years of over 20 dominator points at Richmond. That's in JGR equipment, while his teammates, Christopher Bell, Martin Truex, and Denny Hamlin, racked up 8 performances of 2020 dominator points. If he couldn't outrun his teammates in the same equipment, it's going to be very hard-pressed for me to think he's going to go into an RCR equipment and then be therefore outrun those same exact guys that he couldn't outrun in the same equipment. So for me, I'm going to be off Kyle Busch. I really wanted to play him this week if I saw speed in practice, but without practice, I can't close my eyes and hope he's got the speed.
No, hey, give me a minute. I'm going to go back and I saw a tweet I want to read to you real quick. Keep going, though. It might take me a minute to find it.
Yeah, so for me, and look, guys, we're at 123 likes. We're all going to be on the show for the 5-6 minutes. If you can get us to 150, we'll give you our favorite leverage play of the slate, or favorite play where we're the most overweight on. But again, you only have 5 minutes to do so. So I would take your hand out of your pants and go ahead and go ahead and like the video. So as far as me, I'm looking through where my ownership is going to be at. Definitely overweight on Christopher Bell. I'm just looking at these numbers overall. Not going to be the highest owned driver for me, but definitely going to be overweight the field for sure. on Chris Bell. Austin Dillon's going to be a guy I'm for sure going to play. And look, I'm going to fade Chandler Smith today. Look, if he beats me, he beats me. I just look at the drivers that are in front of him, and knowing that I basically need him to finish in the top 20, I just know you need accidents and attrition in his favor for him to get there today. So yeah, at a different track, maybe T20. I wouldn't need him to T20. Gonna need him to T20 here. Almirola, I'm gonna have exposure to, but my issue with Almirola is it just feels like this may be a biased thing for me. Whenever he's chalk, he just like never gets there. It's like so annoying. Like again, maybe it's a biased thing for me. When Almirola is not chalk, he just kind of squirms his way into the front. I think last week, right? Wasn't magically. Oh no, he got an accident though, because last week he was like
he was there. He was paying off last week.
He was like top 7 or top 8 after being chalk for 3 straight weeks, and you're like, what the hell is he doing up front?
I was cussing because I had faded him last week, and I saw him up there, and I was just so pissed. And I was actually had a little bit of joy when I saw him finally shit his pants.
But that's what I mean. Like, it's like, look, you talk on guys that are racing well that are just dealing with misfortune. It's like anything else, right? The sport's streaky. I mean, you're talking a guy that's 30th, 33rd, 16th, 35th, 21st.
Yeah.
I mean,
the thing I will say though, like last week at Almirola was a road course, right? And road courses is generally not his thing, and like that's why that I think it was justifiable to get off of him when he was chalk in that scenario. But this week, like this is his thing, right? I mean, this is his track type. I know, like we had this conversation that when we were at Phoenix, and he was chalk at Phoenix, right? And he was right. He was right there, running top 12 at Phoenix, right there where he needed to be. And then obviously, it fell apart on him. That was when the tire just fell off magically when he was riding, just driving. The tire just fell off, and he hit the wall, and that was his day, So like that stuff does happen to him, which is just. What do you do? Now
what do you play that a guy like that it looks to be racing well, but consistently has these like random head scratching issues? At what point in your mind, you approach a track where you're like, you know what, fuck this guy. This is a pattern. He might be chalk, but at this point, let him beat me because he's been beating me every time I play him.
About the point we're at now, I guess. I guess you gotta play it case by case scenario when a guy pisses you off enough. But yeah, I think Almirola is like, I found myself dodging around him quite a bit today when I'm building my lineup. So I think a lot of people might do that, which is why like everybody's probably laying on Austin Dillon and Josh Berry. So maybe I should probably rethink that if he's gonna. What's he projected at 25% today, or do you have Almirola's projections in front of you?
He should be higher than 25%. I know his price isn't great, but he should be over 30% at his price, at his win equity, where he's coming from, who's around him. Because remember, it's basically like that, right? Like I think him and Berry might be pretty similar in ownership.
Okay,
but again,
give me Almirola there if they're similar. Like, right? I think that's.
Yeah, Almirola over Berry in that sense. I'm in agreement there as well. And Coop, you wanted to bring up a tweet. Anything else you want to talk on?
Yeah, back to Kyle Busch, you were talking about how he hasn't outperformed his teammates here in Toyota. It's kind of hidden by the fact of he's had very bad luck the last 4 races, brought on by himself. But he was 9th last year, and he spun at the start of the final stage. 9th he finished, but he was black flagged for tape while running in 6th in the other race last year. The 2 years before, he was leading the race and got caught speeding on lap 346. And then the other race that year, he was in 3rd, but hit the commitment cone headed into pit road. So, bad circumstances, but I don't think he was outrun by his teammates. I think just bad circumstances made his results finish worse than what they actually were.
Yeah, and I don't think I was speaking to his results. Like, he doesn't finish well. He's just not scoring the Dominator points, right? Like, he hasn't scored more than 16 Dominator points in those races. So, like, even though, he had bad luck at the end, he still didn't score the fast laps or lead the laps that he's going to need to do to pay off that salary.
I still think, if you're going to play Austin Dillon, you better play Kyle Busch, excuse me.
Fair enough. All right, so guys, any final notes? Jason, I'll start with you. Final notes on the track. Wait, just real quick. I think we got there, right? We got over 150. Oh my Lord, 150 exactly. Wow, it's almost like we get to 150 and people's hands go right back in the pants. I mean, God forbid you go a little over 150, guys. There's 300 of you watching. All right, so we will go through it. Jason, I'll start with you. Who's the guy? And then we'll get out of here. Who's the guy you're most highest leverage on today? Whether it's a guy that you're going to lock in that's going to be already high owned, or a guy that's lower owned you're going to be overweight on. give us a higher leverage guy, the highest leverage guy you're on today.
Yeah, guy I'm highest on, who probably is in the majority of my GPP builds I made today, is Martin Truex Jr. Like, I mean, I don't see a lot of traction out there around him. I don't know what his ownership's projecting to be, but we've talked about all the position differential plays on the slate, and Martin Truex Jr. is just a beast at Richmond. 3 wins here in the last 7 races, best driver rating, the best fast lap, best average finish, most laps led. Like, he's just the king at Richmond, and I don't see Joe Gibbs Racing. You know, it's fast here. I think he's gonna be the guy to beat here on the long run and on the high tire wear track that we have at Richmond today.
Fair enough. Coop, how about you? Highest leverage guy?
Chris Bell. I know he's going to be owned, but I will have lock button probably on Chris Bell.
Interesting. And I my highest leverage guy, and who I will nearly lock in, I do agree with Jason, Austin Dillon today for me. You take every angle, and based on who I need to play from the back, I don't want to play Chandler Smith. I really am not. I'm going to play Amarola, but I'm going to be underweight on Amarola. I'm going to be underweight on Preece. I'm going to be a little overweight on Bubba Wallace, and I'm going to be way overweight on Austin Dillon. It's like you said, Coop, you got to pick spots, right? Like you're not going to be able to get everybody. You got to kind of isolate where you can. I really think Austin Dillon raced really well last week and then just caught a bad accident. The price is good. The win equity is good. Doesn't need a whole lot. Doesn't need to move up a whole lot either. I'm not worried about him being lapped from his starting position. So yeah, I think if he races clean, I do think he gets there for us. But again, that's the big part, right? Races clean. Seems like every week chalk somehow bangs into the wall, or tire randomly falls off, or the pit crew fucks something up when they're changing the tire. It's always interesting. But yeah, Dillon's going to be way overweight for me. So look, obviously, everybody, thank you for joining in today. Good show again. Big thank you to Coop. Big thank you to Jason. Great content as always. This was a below average show for me, so apologize. My content was not that great for this show, but what can you expect at this point? Nade knows the drill.
You did great.
Look, thank you, Jason. It's the little things for me these days, the little things. But no, look, seriously, guys, gamble responsibly, stay safe. Good luck on this track today. Obviously, bet within your means or don't, and go for it all. Do what you got to do, I guess. But yes, we'll be back next week, folks. It will be Easter next week, so who knows how that'll break down for some of us. But yes, all in all, gamble responsibly, stay safe, and as always, run pure. We'll catch you guys next week.